Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of our GA4 Enablement series, where we aim to conquer this shiny new analytics platform. Today, we'll be talking about how to analyze your transactions in GA4. Unlike UA, which had a pre-built report where you could see details of your transactions, GA4 does not have an equivalent. This means that we'll have to build one ourselves. To start off, let's take a look at what you were used to in UA. When analyzing transactions, most people would have looked at the sales performance report under the e-commerce set of reports. Here we have the transaction ID, revenue associated with it, broken down into tax and shipping, any refund amount associated with it, and the quantity or number of units sold in that transaction. If we clicked into the transaction ID, we could drill down into what products were part of the transaction and the revenue and quantity associated with these. Looking at GA4's standard reports under monetization, we can see nothing resembling this. We have overview, e-commerce purchases, which goes into product performance, in-app purchases, publisher ads, user purchase journey. Nothing that even closely resembles what we're used to in sales performance. So we're going to have to create our own in Explorations. Which then brings us to our use case. Your business wants a breakdown of revenue by transaction ID and which products are contained. So using our freeform visualization, I'm going to first select our dimensions. Here we'll only need transaction ID. So you'll notice here in the demo account, they've created a custom dimension called Transaction ID. You want the one under e-commerce. This is the default dimension. Under metrics, we're going to need e-commerce revenue, tax amount, shipping, and e-commerce quantity. Add all of those to our exploration, and you can see that we have a basic replica of what we're used to in UA. So you might be asking yourself, what is this not set row up the top? And why is there such a large quantity figure against it? To explain this, we need to understand that the metric e-commerce quantity is not just used for purchased. It's used for any quantities in any sort of e-commerce event. So if you added 3 of a product to your cart, the e-commerce quantity for that add to cart event would be 3. Basically, because everything else, transaction ID, e-commerce revenue, tax amount, shipping amount, only relate to purchases, this row is showing us all the quantity values of every non-purchase event. So we can safely ignore it, or we can filter it down out the bottom here. You would just need to add event name under your dimensions and then filter by event name equals purchase. Now, to find out what products were within a transaction. Unfortunately, we can't create drill down features in Explorations, so we can't click into the transaction ID. But even if we could, GA4 wouldn't like this, because this whole table we've created is event scoped, since it's based around the purchase event. Whereas analyzing what products are in a transaction would be item scoped. Let's create a new tab and demonstrate this. We'll need to add a new dimension of item name. And for metrics, we'll need to add in item revenue and item quantity. add in transaction ID, item name, item revenue, and item quantity to your report, and then you'll start to see something like we're used to in UA. Now this is a little bit hard to read, since if a transaction contained multiple items, it's going to be across multiple rows. So you can see here that this transaction ID ending in 16, we've got Chrome Dino Socks and Google Vintage Cap Navy, but it's spread across 2 different rows. There might even be other items, such as up here, which are part of the same transaction, but it's really hard to see how many items were actually part of that, since it's all broken down by this. So to make it a little bit cleaner, we can use something called nested rows. So this is the option over here on the left. If I select yes from the drop down here, it's going to essentially collapse our main dimension, which is transaction ID, into a single row, and then we can very easily see exactly how many items were part of that transaction ID, the item revenue associated with each of those items there, and the item quantity, so how many were actually in that single transaction. So I've then got my breakdown of revenue and quantity for each item, and it's really easy to read. Here are our key takeouts for today. GA4 does not have a standard report for transactions. Transaction ID is an event scope dimension. E-commerce quantity is a metric used across all e-commerce events. You'll need to create separate visualizations for transaction and product breakdowns. Nested rows can help collapse repetitive dimensions into a single row. I hope you enjoyed that video, and we'll see you in our next episode.